If you've ever had to choose between honor and family, leave a comment, hit like, share this story, and follow the channel so you don't miss what comes next. My name is Valentina Moore, 33 years old, lead engineer at an automation logistics company in Austin, Texas. For the past 6 years, I've buried myself in work, not for the money, but because I believed I was protecting the last thing our family still had: reputation and trust. But that Friday night, when my father, Robert Moore, sat under the dim chandelier light at the dinner table and calmly said, "Olivia will be running the company," I knew my life had shifted into another chapter. I set my fork down, looked up, and tried to keep my voice steady. "You mean Olivia is replacing me?" My father didn't even glance at me. He kept slicing his steak like we were discussing who'd wash the dishes. "Valentina, you know this. You're great with tech, but leadership, that's just not your strength." I could feel the edge of the table pressing into my palms, my fingers turning pale from the grip. I built that entire system. If not for the software I created, more freight would have gone bankrupt 3 years ago. Across the table, Olivia, my younger sister by 2 years, took a slow sip of red wine, her lips curling like she'd just heard a mildly amusing joke. She had never written a single line of code, yet she was always front and center in every PR photo. Evening gowns, curled hair, smiling like saving the company was just part of her weekend plans. My dad chuckled quietly, then reached into his wallet. I thought he might pull out a letter, maybe a signed document, something meaningful. But no. He placed a crumpled $100 bill on the table, right between me and my untouched glass of wine. "For your effort," he said, still not looking at me. No one spoke. My mother, sitting across from me, turned her face away, her eyes fixed on the ivory napkin in her lap. She'd always done that. Chosen silence, chosen the sidelines. I looked at the bill, then at the man I had once idolized, the man I had spent my entire life trying to make proud. I picked up the bill, folded it, tucked it into the napkin, and set it neatly on the edge of my plate. "Valentina, don't be dramatic," he said, glancing at me like I was a former employee asking for a bonus. I stood up. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm stepping out of the background. Clearly, that's all I was ever meant to be in this family." Olivia let out a quiet laugh and fake cough to cover it. "Valentina," my mom called gently, but I had already stepped away from the table. My heels tapped lightly on the polished oak floor. I didn't slam the door, didn't cry, didn't say another word. I just left. As I walked through the hallway lined with framed photos from the company's grand opening, I paused. I looked at my own face in one of the photos, eyes full of hope. Now everything felt far more clear. I walked out of the house I once believed was home. And I had no idea that was only the beginning. The next morning I still showed up to the office on time, badge scanning smoothly at the main gate. October in Seattle had started to cool, and the damp air made my shoes slip a little on the glossy stone floors. Every inch of the building was familiar, every texture in the walls, even the tiny crack on the hallway carpet on the 6th floor that no one ever fixed. But that morning, the familiar felt different. Inside the lobby, people stopped smiling when I walked by. A few coworkers greeted me quickly, but their eyes moved on. Something was off. A legal assistant, Ben, was holding a stack of folders, and when he saw me, he abruptly turned and slipped into a nearby meeting room. I said nothing. Kept one hand inside my coat pocket, nails digging lightly into the lining. I headed straight for my office, the CTO's room on the 7th floor, next to the main conference room. The door was opened. Inside, the desk was empty. No computer. The vision boards behind it were gone. My handmade prototype model, gone. The framed photo of last year's dev team, gone. Sitting in my chair, legs crossed, tapping her fingers to music only she could hear, was Olivia. She looked up with a bright smile, like I was a new hire asking for directions. "Hey, oh Valentina, I thought you knew." I stood still. Knew what? Then I'm moving into this office, she said casually, waving her hand like it was a minor update. Starting this week, I'll be leading the departments. You'll be supporting. Supporting how? My voice didn't waver though my throat was dry. Not totally sure, she said, faking a thoughtful look. Maybe IT support? Internal training? Dad thinks you could use some rest. I looked around again. The custom oak bookshelf I ordered, gone. Same room, but it had been stripped. And a CTO role? She smiled faintly. You already know. Change is necessary. The team needs someone with presence, someone more relatable. I felt heat rising to my temples, but my hand stayed on the strap of my bag. Still. So where am I sitting now? Tech support, she said. Second floor, end of the hall, next to the supply closet. She said it like she was directing me to guest parking. She stood, stretched. Don't worry, we're still a team, just new roles. I turned without replying. The elevator took nearly a minute to reach the 7th floor. I waited, alone, under the flickering yellow light. My whole body felt cold, and it wasn't the weather. When I got to the new room, or rather, the far end corner of a hallway with no windows, I saw 3 desks, 2 interns whispering over circuit boards, and a chair with no name tag. I sat down. No one looked up. I opened my personal laptop, logged into the internal network, just to make sure I still had access to the system I had built. Luckily I did. I stared at the screen. The old lines of code blinked back at me, steady, familiar, like breath. They wanted to push me aside, to keep me quiet, to erase me. But they forgot something. I don't need to scream to be heard. All I need is time. And they had just given me the silence I needed to prepare. I just didn't know where that time would lead me yet. Every morning, I arrived at the company right on time, taking my seat in the back corner of the 2nd floor, a space with no windows, no individual ventilation, just the constant whirring of a photocopier and the faint smell of printer ink clinging to the air. No one asked why I was there, not even the department head. They glanced, then looked away. Maybe they knew. Or maybe everyone was just keeping their safe distance, like my presence might carry fallout. I didn't talk much, just opened my laptop, slipped on my headphones, no music, and used them like a curtain, watching everything while being watched by no one. And I saw more than I expected. 3 days after Olivia moved to the 7th floor, her calendar filled up. She was in meetings almost the entire day, mostly with people I didn't recognize, old friends from weekend parties, not names I'd ever seen on department performance reports. 1 week in, 3 senior engineers resigned. 1 gave no clear reason, the other 2 applied to rival companies. I knew because one of them messaged me on LinkedIn with just 3 words, "It's getting bad." I didn't reply. I just took notes. Logged her meetings, tracked changes in system access permissions, even saved misdirected emails that planning accidentally forwarded to tech. Olivia made a lot of changes, but none of them improved anything. She cut quality control steps, skipped A/B testing, and gave final approval rights to a stylist. I'm not kidding. He used to manage visuals for a beauty brand she had promoted a few years back. I saw one email she sent to the entire operations team. It read something like, "We need less tech, more feeling." Tech was what saved more freight from collapse. Feeling doesn't automate global supply chains. Down on the 2nd floor where I sat, I often heard whispers from employees who had slipped downstairs to make quiet phone calls. Their voices were tense. One said, "I warned them." Another, "There's no way we hit the deadline with this update." Still, I said nothing. I waited. Every Wednesday evening, once the office quieted, I logged into the internal system to monitor algorithm adjustments. I still had read-only access. My name hadn't been removed from the senior engineering list. Maybe they forgot? Or maybe they assumed I no longer cared. I saved copies of everything, not out of spite, but to remind myself I built this, from zero, Every line of code, every chart, every tangled simulation David and I rewrote after staying up 3 nights straight, all because of one small formatting error in the auto-packing logic. Now they were dismantling it, bit by bit. I knew this wouldn't end with an apology email or a boardroom meeting. It would end with something bigger. I wasn't sure where I'd begin, but I started making a list. Friday night, light rain in Seattle. I sat by the window in a small cafe in Capitol Hill. Street lamps flickered in orange reflections on puddles outside. My old laptop sat closed in front of me. 3 people entered, one by one. No need to order. They pulled out chairs like this was a weekly ritual. Jake. The former CFO pulled a cloth from his coat pocket and wiped his glasses. His salt and pepper hair was damp from the rain. Maya, the data analyst, had her hair tied up, hoodie on, no makeup, her eyes sharp like she was still mid-analysis. And David, the software engineer, carried 3 sandwich boxes from the shop across the street, placed them in the center of the table and said, "Nobody ate yet?" I looked at them. There was something like gratitude inside me, but I didn't say it out loud. Jake spoke first, voice just above a whisper. "Val, what's the plan?" I opened my laptop, pulled a folder from my bag. Inside, system sketches, architecture blueprints, routing algorithm designs. I had started 4 years ago, back when this was just a weekend side project. "I'm not here to fix what they broke," I said slowly. "I'm here to build something entirely new." David frowned. "From scratch?" "Not really," I replied, handing him a USB. "The original version is still mine. The most important parts were never uploaded to More Freight's servers." Maya chuckled softly, amused. "You really play the long game." "Not to protect myself," I said, because I knew they'd never value what they didn't understand. Jake reviewed the folder, silent at first, then nodded. "If this works, it'll cut logistics costs in the Western region by at least 30%. And if we apply the machine learning angle you've got in here," he looked up, "we'll crush them." David set his sandwich down. "I'm in." Maya nodded. "Me too, but we'll need time and no attention." I nodded. "Everyone works remotely. No central server. We store everything locally until beta's done." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Project name?" I smirked. "Horizon. A new line to aim for." The 3 of them paused. No speeches, no handshakes. Everyone already knew what had just begun. When the cafe started clearing tables, we left separately. I walked home, past a quiet block. The rain soaked through my coat, but I didn't mind. In my head, the code began aligning itself, like a melody I'd played so many times I could hear it with my eyes closed. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because they'd given me a reason to begin again. And they hadn't seen how far I could really go. 3 weeks after that meeting, we were operating like ghosts. No office, no company emails, each of us in a different city. Jake in Denver, Maya in Salt Lake City, David in San Jose. I stayed in Seattle. Days at More Freight, nights in my tiny studio apartment, with barely enough room for a desk and the creaky chair I'd bought from a second-hand store 5 years ago. We called it Horizon, a real-time logistics optimization system smarter than anything on the market. It didn't just rely on past data. It learned in real time. Weather, traffic, load changes, even shifting consumer patterns. I typed each line of code like stitching up something that had been ripped apart. Each keystroke reminded me of nights coding with David, back when the company was too broke to keep the lights on. We shared instant noodles and fought over the one working hard drive. Horizon was the next chapter of a story they had abandoned. The day we finished the first build, I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the black screen as it blinked the green word. Ready. I sent product introductions to the top 3 logistics firms in the Pacific Northwest, attached a demo, and offered a simple deal, no commitment unless satisfied after 30 days. Within less than 2 weeks, all 3 replied. They wanted meetings, they wanted contracts, they wanted implementation by next quarter. The first contract, $52 million over 3 years. No equity tie-ins. Just one exclusivity clause in a specific sector. Jake called at 11 p.m., voice deep, a little shaky. We really pulled this off. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the contract glowing on my screen. It didn't feel like triumph or vindication. It just felt right. Everything was finally where it should be. 3 days later, I submitted my resignation letter to More Freight. No explanations. I packed my things in 45 minutes. Not much. A few notebooks, a miniature model of the old distribution system, and a USB engraved with the words, "Build, not beg." I left the old office just as the sun broke through the clouds. Outside, the maple tree in front of the building had started to change. Red streaked with golden orange. I took a deep breath. Not cold, not warm, just enough to remind me I was still alive. They didn't push me out of More Freight, they just assumed I'd never leave. They were wrong. And I didn't leave alone. 6 weeks after I walked away, Horizon completed its first trial phase. One of the largest partners in Tacoma migrated their entire logistics system to our platform in under 2 weeks. No bugs, no downtime. Most importantly, performance doubled. We didn't announce anything, no press release, no LinkedIn post. We just moved quietly. More Freight didn't. I started receiving messages from former coworkers, some from operations, some from the dev team. The details varied, but they all carried the same tone. Chaos. Olivia fired the head of engineering this morning. No replacement yet. New system integration deadline delayed twice. The partners threatening to enforce contract penalties. Word is your dad is trying to sell off a division to cut losses. I read those messages on a cold, rainy night while sitting alone in Horizon's rented meeting room, flickering overhead lights, but an oddly calm space. Jake came in without a word. He placed an internal More Freight report in front of me. Something someone had leaked. It took 10 seconds to scan the whole page. They were losing clients. Not because anyone sabotaged them, but because they had cut out the one keeping the rhythm. If you've ever stayed silent because no one believed you, or were blamed just for speaking the truth, leave a comment. Share this story if you think someone out there needs to hear it. That same evening, Maya texted, "You should know, More Freight just lost their biggest client of the last 10 years, Pacific West. They've chosen Horizon instead." I read that line again and again. I didn't smile, didn't clap. I just stood up slowly and poured myself a glass of water. Something shifted inside. Not revenge, exactly. More like the feeling when someone finally sees what you've been saying all along. 3 days later, I was invited to speak at the annual TechScale event in Portland. It was the first time I took the stage as CEO of Horizon. Under bright lights and camera shutters, I spoke about how a small group of people rebuilt a tech platform on trust. Afterward, as I stepped off stage, a woman approached. Slender build, deep-set eyes, a quiet voice. "Valentina, I was once the lead engineer at More. Thank you for proving silence has weight." I nodded. No one needed apologies anymore. Everything was already clear. The next morning, I heard Olivia had called an emergency meeting, but no one leaked what was discussed. A few hours later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Landline, no name, no prior message. I answered, and a man's voice came through. Slowly, like he was measuring every word. "Valentina, it's your father. We need to talk." I said nothing. My hand held the phone still. I didn't hang up, but I didn't speak either. I wanted to see how far they'd go this time. 4 days after that call, I saw them again. My father and Olivia. At Horizon's office. I hadn't invited them. They'd scheduled the meeting through my assistant, with an email subject line that read simply, "Urgent meeting request." 7 a.m., Monday morning, they showed up. On time. My father wore a charcoal gray suit, tie slightly crooked. Olivia wore a beige coat, her lipstick softer than usual. No red lips, no sunglasses. I sat in the sixth-floor conference room, glass windows overlooking Fremont's dock, cargo barges parting the water. Claire sat beside me, quietly taking notes. Across from me were two people who once thought I didn't belong at their table. My father spoke first. His voice wasn't loud, but it faltered at the end. Valentina. Maybe we can start again. I didn't nod. I didn't reject him either. He pressed on, trying to steady his tone. More freight needs saving, and you're the only one who can do it. Olivia glanced at me, then quickly looked away when our eyes met. I kept my voice even. You mean, you want me back? His shoulders dipped slightly. Not back, exactly. More like a partnership. If you agree, I'll recommend the board appoint you Chief Operating Officer. Olivia will stay on in a strategic role, but you'll have full control over tech and operations. I looked straight at him. So I'd still report to her? Olivia pressed her lips together. Don't take it the wrong way. I'm not trying to... I cut her off gently. No need to explain. I just want to hear the offer clearly. My father shifted in his seat, folding his hands over the table. We could combine resources. Use Horizon's technology, preserve what still works at more freight. Rebuild. Together. I pulled a pen from my coat pocket, rolled it slowly between my fingers. I remember, you once said I was only good with code, not leadership material. No one responded. I set the pen on the table, quietly, no sound. That's different now, he said. You've proven otherwise. I looked out the window. Morning light hit the table, revealing faint scratches in the wood grain. Then why not let me lead? I asked without turning around. Olivia stood abruptly. So, you get everything? The company, the name? I looked up, calm and slow. I didn't take it. I built it, from scratch. Her face reddened. You just got lucky. I let out a small laugh. Luck doesn't build software that runs 90 days without a bug. My father tried to interrupt, but I stood up first. I'm not accepting. Both of them froze. Then I continued, my voice lower. Not out of anger, but because I refused to return to the place that once held me underwater, only to reach out when the flood rose. I walked out of the conference room, leaving them in silence. Claire turned to me as we entered the hallway. Are you sure? I didn't look at her, just said quietly, I'm not here to save them. I'm here to prove they bet on the wrong person. And it seems they still haven't realized that. The news that More Freight officially filed for bankruptcy came on the business report at 8 a.m. Thursday, while I was sipping coffee at my usual cafe by Lake Union. No big headline, no noise. Just a clean line. More Freight files for bankruptcy after prolonged losses. I read it, folded my phone, and cupped the warm mug with both hands. The cafe still played soft jazz. No one noticed the shift in my face. I didn't smile. I didn't sigh. It just felt like something quietly clicking shut in my head, like closing an old file and placing it in a drawer for good. That afternoon, Claire handed me a thick folder, the asset liquidation files for More Freight, factories, headquarters, rights to their old logistics platform, and the name, More Freight, Inc. Do you want to bid on it? She asked. Not curious, just doing her job. I didn't answer right away. That night, I walked home instead of calling a car. It was mid-autumn. Leaves lined both sides of the sidewalk. I passed the slope near 45th Street, where a warehouse once stood, the same place David and I first tested our routing model years ago. The system was buggy back then, but David's eyes lit up, like a kid taking apart a toy. I remembered that feeling. Doing something not to prove anything to anyone, but because I believed it could make things better. By the time I stepped into my apartment, I already knew what I would do. 3 days later, I sat in a large meeting room downtown, across from a court representative and the liquidation officer. I didn't bring a lawyer. I signed the paperwork to purchase all of More Freight's remaining assets, on one condition: the name would never be used in any future business model. You want to erase it permanently? The liquidation officer asked, a bit unsure. I nodded. I don't need to preserve someone else's legacy. I just needed to show them that what they once saw as secondary was actually the core. The next day, Olivia texted me, still using her old number. You won. Happy now? I stared at the message, leaning back in my office chair, morning light seeping through the blinds, glowing softly against the New Horizon prototype on my desk. I didn't reply, because happiness was never the goal of this story. I just wanted back what should have never been taken. And I had one final thing to do before closing this chapter. 3 weeks after the acquisition, a handwritten letter appeared on my desk. No sender name, but I recognized the handwriting. Slanted right, with the R a bit smaller than the rest. It was from my father. I didn't open it right away. I set it beside my monitor and left it there all morning. Every time I considered opening it, I answered another email or adjusted a layout for the next Horizon update. Finally, around noon, I picked up the letter opener from my shelf. The blade cut a clean line without tearing the paper. Cream-colored paper. A single line, no embellishments. Valentina? I don't expect forgiveness. Only that one day, you'll understand. I read it over and over. Not because I was moved, but because I was surprised. The words were brief, direct, no dancing around the point. For the first time in my life, he wasn't speaking like a man giving orders, just a man stepping back. I held the letter between 2 fingers, paused, then let it fall into the fireplace tray beside my desk. The flame caught quickly. Thin, dry paper. It didn't blaze, just curled into ash. Claire came in a few minutes later with an invitation, an industry gala, hosted by the new owners of the Moore Mansion. They invited me as an honored guest and keynote speaker. I was going to decline, but then I remembered the look on Olivia's face when she left that conference room for the last time. Disoriented, missing the smug smile she once wore in my seat. I looked up at Claire. Confirm it, I'll go. She hesitated. Are you sure? I thought you didn't want anything to do with that place anymore. I shrugged. True, but sometimes, to end a story you have to close the door yourself. I didn't need to say more. Claire nodded and stepped out. I returned to my desk and opened the Horizon demo again. But this time my mind wasn't on the code. It was already in a gold-lit room, where the past once imagined it was the future. The gala was held on Saturday night, at the estate where my family used to throw year-end parties. The same place my father once praised my taste when I was 15 for picking the right tablecloth color. Now, the building belonged to a real estate group, renovated with European crystal chandeliers, black velvet chairs, and a guest list of CEOs and investors. I arrived in a plain black dress, no rhinestones, no slit. I wasn't there to impress, I was there to finish. At first, no one recognized me. They looked at me like a familiar face without a name, until the host took the stage and read my name aloud. Suddenly, they stood, like remembering something they'd ignored for too long. Valentina Moore, founder of Horizon Systems, the woman who transformed logistics in the past 3 years. I walked up. The soft gold light hit my hand, revealing a faint scar on my right wrist, from a sleepless night and a dull blade during our first prototype. I didn't say much, just told a short story about being moved to the 2nd floor, next to an old copier, and how that helped me see who really runs things. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the one who stays at the desk after the lights go out. In the crowd, I met my father's eyes, sitting quietly in the back row. Olivia wasn't there. Maybe she was smart enough not to return to the place that once called her the next legacy. I stepped off the stage, no applause, no cheers. Just a silence that didn't feel awkward, more like the room exhaled, finally admitting what everyone already knew but never dared to say. I walked the hall toward the balcony. Outside, Seattle was turning to winter. Wind crisp, but clean. In the distance, shipping containers still glowed. Freighters still moved. Life went on, even without the name Moore in the system anymore. I stood there for a moment, saying nothing. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message to Claire. Start planning expansion into the Asian market. It's time. Behind me, the gala carried on, glasses clinking, smooth jazz in the background, a few polite laughs echoing through the hall. I turned away, stepped down each stair, feeling lighter with every move. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe in your car, right before bed, or on a day when you needed a story to remind yourself to stand back up. Let me know where you're listening from. And if you want to hear more true journeys like this, don't forget to follow the channel because the next story might be the one you've been waiting for. Valentina's story isn't just about quiet revenge. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes, what we truly need isn't recognition, but the courage to stay standing when others dismiss us. In real life, there will be moments when you're pushed out of the very thing you helped build. But instead of clinging to someone else's approval, use your strength and persistence to create something no one dared to imagine. Not to prove anything, but to live in the truth of your own worth. And that is enough.